So recording started. Welcome everybody. Um, yeah, this week's session of our CKE office hours is about load testing with as a service, whatever, with Apache Jmeter on Kubernetes. We have been developing the whole thing the last 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks. I started that and handed over to Christopher or Chris here in Cologne. He started by uh, Kubernauts by the beginning of January, one of our lovely CK8s, and active in Honor Slack as well. So we put together this guide. The link is provided here on the meetup page as a post on Medium. He will go through the documentation or the blog post later and go through the deployment steps. But before he goes more in detail into the process, how load testing works, I will share my screen, my terminal, and show you my terminal here. Okay, so hope you see my terminal now, right? Yeah, okay, fine. So I am running a Vagrant box, Ubuntu 16 version on my Mac. And we have here our TK8, the Kubernauts installer, which I showed you last week, and then do a TK8 install. The source will be available on GitLab to anyone who would like to have access. So I know Theo wanted to have access last week. I changed a lot, whitewashed, and there was some security concerns with secrets and so on. I hope I can put the version on GitLab and provide access to you. So TK8 is a command line tool which installs Kubernetes with KOps and some more additional services on top. The only thing which one needs to have is a bucket on AWS and source the credentials, the access key and secret key, and then the base cluster will be created. My cluster in this case is ltas.kubernauts.de. It takes some minutes to settle. Okay, we have to wait a little bit, and the cluster will be up and running. And then with the deployment target TK8 deploy, we will deploy the whole services like Prometheus, Zipkin, Kibana. If we want, we can do automate the Jmeter installation as well, but currently we haven't done that. We don't have any target for that in our make files, but maybe if someone would like to have it with the same installation with deploy target, then we can provide it as well. Good. Let's switch to the browser and go to AWS. My browser, where is my lovely browser? That's this one. Okay, so let's refresh. I'm on AWS. Yeah, you see, I have a small cluster, one master and one node. Till it's up and running, then I will switch and show you a little bit about the code. That's here. So if you have any questions, please write into the chat. Perhaps Chris will take care about it. So mainly we have a make file here where we define our Kubernetes version. We are using the latest one, or no, that's not the latest, but the version which we are using on client side, A186, and the latest KOps version. And here we'll define our bucket. We don't create a bucket over the CLI. We create that manually, but we can create it through the makefile as well. And then here is our ingress username and password. We change every time. It should be generated dynamically. That's on our to-do list. And then we have our make targets here, make all, or make installs the Kubernetes cluster, make uninstall, or TK8 uninstalls the whole thing, and the deploy target deploys a bunch of services on top of the cluster. That's Grafana, Kibana, Zipkin, and some more. Okay, so we have different clusters running. That's my LTAS cluster. That's another cluster named Jmeter only, and some other clusters for staging and production. P is the production one, and SA is the staging one. We have two staging environments. So the whole manifest files are placed under the cluster name. In my case, I have my ingress controller here, the cube Lego, health check, and so on. Then we have a bunch of scripts which create the secrets and our keys which we are using to set up the cluster. And our dashboards are here, Grafana and Kibana dashboards. Good, let's go and switch to our terminal again, back to the terminal. This is this one. Okay. So now I hope the cluster, the two-node cluster should be running. Yes, that's my master and the node. And with make deploy, I will now deploy my secrets, certificates, and so on, and run a bunch of deployments for on top of my cluster. So as you see, I have Elasticsearch, FluentD, InfluxDB for Grafana and Hipster, and InfluxDB for my load testing as a service, bunch of Nginx, Ingress controllers, Jaeger as a collector for tracing. I'm not, to be honest, I don't know what it really does and how to use it, but okay, it is new in the latest version, and we are using Weave as overlay network here. So to access the cluster, then you get an output here. I hope it should work. Let's go to the browser again, switch back to my browser here, and call this with UI. And now I have to get my admin password, kubectl config view. Oh, okay, password. Skip it. And now I have also my dashboard here, and the Grafana dashboard. This is another environment with another Jmeter cluster, which is Grafana Jmeter with subdomain, which was mapped in DNS by Chris. And now he will go to mainly through this document and through the code. And if you have any questions, please ask questions. And if you have a question to me, please ask now or later. Is there any question in the chat? No. Good. Then, Chris, please share your screen. Hand over to you. No. You have to activate in the bottom of the Blackboard Collaborate your microphone. But I can't hear you here. Okay, now I can see your screen, but I can't hear you through my headset. Is anybody else? Perhaps I can't hear you. We are in the same room. Can anybody, anybody else hear Chris? Okay. Recording, Christopher. Agree. No, no. Perhaps I have to unmute myself.
Yeah. What about now? Okay. Cool. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Hi, Kubernauts. Cool. Can you? I believe everybody can see my screen. Uh, the link to the blog post is also on Meetup page. So you could come here and then you click and then you can have access to the blog post. So basically, what we have is Jmeter running on a Kubernetes cluster. So we assume you already have a working cluster for you to go through this guide. So Arash has already given an overview of how to get a working cluster. So once you have a Kubernetes cluster running, then you can go. I mean, you can follow this article, and then it gives you an overview of what load testing is. So what we want to describe today is distributed load testing, and if you using Apache Jmeter, because Apache Jmeter is the most widely used open source testing frameworks, and it supports most, if not all, the applications. And you can also go to their website. You can go to the Jmeter website. You can see a lot of even plugins, and it's not only HTTP or HTTPS. You can use it, and you can also write your own plugin if you have the expertise. So you have, in a distributed scenario, you have a master, a JMeter master, and the JMeter master is the one that you interact with, is where you copy your test script to. Okay, and once you copy your test script to the JMeter master, the JMeter master now sends the commands of the configuration to the slaves. So the slaves are the one that actually carry out the load test towards your environment or towards your application. So this image here shows that's the endpoint. That's where you want to actually test. That's where your application resides, or your web application. So the JMeter sends the request to the slaves, and then the slaves goes ahead to, to load test your environment. So what we have done is to adapt this in Kubernetes. So with Kubernetes, what we did is to create the images for the JMeter master and also for the slave, and you can see the location of the of the images in the manifest file. If you go to the GitHub page here, so this is the GitHub page. So for instance, if we check for the master deploy, you can see here that we have a Docker Hub account, Kubernauts Lab, and you can use this to pull the image for the JMeter master. So so on the Kubernetes, you have the master, then you have the slaves. All of them are running on separate pods, and then you have InfluxDB. The reason you have the InfluxDB is once the slaves, once they are testing, they send back the results to the master, and then the master sends it to the InfluxDB, and it stores it as a metric so that it can be shown on Grafana. Okay, so but let me quickly share my screen to show the testing, the JMeter test screen, test case. So just a second. Oh, sorry. Oops. So we have the Jmeter test script, and the brief overview of how Jmeter works is you need to have a thread group. The thread group is where you have the settings for instance, the number of users that you want to simulate and the ramp up time, the time it takes for it to complete the test and then move on to the next steps test, and also the number of times you want it to do the test. So we have 20 here, and you could increase it depending on how robust you want your test to be. Now, this is what we are testing. We are testing a home page. Can you see? You are testing the home page here, which you have the part here. We're also testing another page on the website, which is the consulting, and then we're also testing this URL. Then we are testing this URL also on the website. And where you have your configuration for InfluxDB is under the backend listener. So when you click on the backend listener, you can see from the drop down menu there that we are using the InfluxDB backend listener. And here you have the parameters. This must this parameter must align with your InfluxDB service details. That means the name of the InfluxDB service that you have in your cluster, because the InfluxDB port and the Jmeter master and the Jmeter slave, they are all in the same namespace. And if they are not in the same namespace, you need to modify this so as to give it the complete URL. So we are naming this Cloud Sky just as an example, so that in InfluxDB we can we can make it unique, and then you can leave this. The measurement is Jmeter. That means the database name in your InfluxDB should be Jmeter. You need to create a database on InfluxDB, and the name should be Jmeter. Okay, and then you can leave the rest. You can say summary false so that you can have more metrics, and that's that with the test script. So let's go back to to the to the article. Okay, can you see my screen again? Okay. Now you can see it now. Okay. Now, so that's the architecture on Kubernetes. So once you do that, this is the GitHub repo that we created, and this is the example. I mean, the explanation of what we have on the GitHub repo. The Grafana Jmeter template is the prepared dashboard template for Jmeter, which we'll see in a second. And then the dashboard script is what you use to populate Grafana with the data source, which will be the InfluxDB. The Jmeter cluster setup cluster, this is the main script that brings up the namespace and the pods and the services. So this first of all checks if kubectl is in your environment. If it's there, it gives you a short version of what is there, and then it gives you the current list of namespace that is there. Then it asks you for the name of the namespace that you want to create, which we call tenant. So you could give it a name like development or production or testing. So once you give it a name, it checks if that namespace exists. If it exists, then it tells you that it exists, then it stops. But if the namespace does not exist, then it creates the namespace. Then after creating the namespace, it goes ahead to create the slaves, the Jmeter slaves. After creating the Jmeter slaves, it creates a service. The Jmeter, the reason we have a service for the slaves is that, and it's an headless service. In an headless service, you are not using a round robin or a DNS type to expose your service, because you only need the IPs of the slaves. And when you get the IP of the slaves, you pass it to the master. So we are using this just to make it easier, so that you don't have to get the IPs of the slaves manually. I'll show you the script we are using to do that also. So once it creates the slaves deployment and also the service, then it creates the master. We have a config map also for the master. Then we have the deployment script for the master. Then it creates the InfluxDB and the service, then also the Grafana, and then the service. And then it gives you a working printout of what you have in your cluster. So I just explained what I have here also. It's the same thing that is there. It gives you a description of what the files are. And then the Grafana service, by default, we are using a node port, and we are using a node port by default because it depends on your infrastructure. So if you're on a public cloud, you could use a load balancer like we did. So if you're using a load balancer, you could use the load balancer directly, or you can create a CNAME, a canonical name to you can create a canonical name on, for instance, on AWS, and then map it to the load balancer IP or the load balancer URL. Okay. Now, once you have your setup, or once you have your cluster running, the dashboard.sh, it creates an InfluxDB database named Jmeter. I showed that in the Jmeter script, test script. And then after that, it creates a data source in Grafana automatically, and the name of that data source is JMeterDB. Okay, so once it does that, then you can now proceed to initiate this start test script. This start test script, it picks up the name of your test script, and then it pushes it into the master. All right, let's go to the start test. Now it asks you the name to enter the path to the Jmeter test script file, and then first of all, it will get the Jmeter master port. So once it gets the Jmeter master port with this command, then it copies the Jmeter test script and then copies it into the Jmeter master port. So once it copies it, then it goes into the master port, and then initiates this command. So if you log into the Jmeter master port and you check this command, you will see that we have inside the command we have the Jmeter command, and then also a parameter that will get the Jmeter slave pod IPs, and it will pass this automatically to the master. So I'll share my my terminal now, so that you can see there is a script we are currently running now. So okay, so okay, this is the line where we initiate the start test.sh. Then it will ask to enter the path to the JMX file, which is the Jmeter test script, and the name of the file is this cloudsky.jmx. And now automatically it starts the test. Then the script also gets the pod IPs. These are the these are the IPs of the slaves. So once it gets the IPs of the slaves, then it starts the process on them, and then it goes ahead to push the test scripts, and then you see something like this. Okay, so once it does that, then you can see the results in your Grafana, which we have shared. I'll share the Grafana screen again. Okay, so because we already have a now. So once you are running your test here on your terminal, you will see a sample graph like this. You see the active users, which is the number of threads, and then you see the hits per second. You have the total hits, then you have the hits per second, then you have the errors. We don't have errors here because the URLs are live and we can get them. Then you can see the average response time based on the URLs you are testing. I showed that we named all these things in the test script, and that's the purpose. Once you give it a name, a unique name, if you come back to your Grafana, it will show you the statistics based on those names that you set in your Jmeter test script. And then you have the transaction per second, then the errors per second, then you have the error details. So if any of the URLs are giving a problem, or if they are giving a response code that is apart from the 200 response code, which is okay, it will give you a list of the error details. Now it could give you maybe 404 or 500. But because the test kits we have now, it doesn't have any errors. So that's why we don't have errors here. So that's just a brief overview of how it works, and you could try this also, and let's see if you have any questions or any clarifications. We can attend to it. Okay.
So great. Thank you very much, Chris.
Yeah.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fine. Good. Then there is no question currently. I will share again my screen to show you only the slides. I was not able to provide the link to the slide on the GitHub page, but I can paste the URL into the chat for everyone who didn't. Where is the chat here? Blackboard here. So what we showed, to sum up. So TK8 install will install the whole Kubernetes cluster. TK8 deploy currently deploys the whole target. So Prometheus, Zipkin, Kibana, Jmeter, whatever. So it's not nice because we want to have perhaps someone doesn't need any Prometheus and wants to deploy only Jmeter. That's
Yeah.
the next step where we provide only a deploy target for Jmeter. So, and good. The next thing where we are working on it is to deploy OpenStack on top of Kubernetes. With OpenStack Helm project is in the pipeline. We did some work on it, but with some troubles, but we don't give up. We want to bring it to the end. And we have a conference in Leipzig by German Unix user group. You're invited if you are in Germany in that's in 2 weeks, I think. end of February, beginning of March, 27th of February to 2nd March in Leipzig, in the University of Leipzig, where we want to show how to deploy OpenStack on top of Kubernetes with our TK8 installer. Yeah, that's perhaps a slide from last week. It didn't change anything on that slide. Perhaps, yeah, I provided a link to the whole ecosystem as a mind map here, where we are going to provide additional targets to install some other solutions on Kubernetes from the ecosystem for secret management, vault, and so on. Good. You have the link to the slides. Unfortunately, as mentioned, I was not able to update the meetup page with this link because apparently after the meetup is started, you can change the text of the meetup page. If there is no questions, then I would like to thank you together with Chris for your attention and for joining us. And let's keep in touch on Slack if you have any other questions regarding the Jmeter or load testing as a service installation. Please ask us on Slack, or you can find my email. Okay, my Twitter account is here. My email address is very easy, arash@cloudsky.com or arash@kubernauts.io. Please contact me or directly Chris. So thank you very much. And now